Hey there, everyone. Welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're switching things up a bit.
Oh, how so?
Well, instead of tackling a whole bunch of sources, we're going to really zero in on just one.
Intriguing. What's the source material this time?
A novel called Peggy-Alone.
Peggy-Alone. That title rings a bell, but I can't quite place it.
Maybe you read it as a kid. It's considered a children's book, but trust me, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Well, now you've got me curious. What makes Peggy-Alone so special that it warrants an entire deep dive?
On the surface, it's a charming, heartwarming story about a young girl navigating life in a small town.
Sounds delightful. But I'm sensing a but coming.
But underneath that charming exterior, Peggy-Alone explores some pretty complex themes. Social dynamics, kindness, what it means to truly connect with others, even social class. It's all there, woven into this seemingly simple story.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my interest. So where do we begin? Paint us a picture of this world that Peggy inhabits.
All right, so imagine a small town, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody's business.
I can picture it. Charming houses, tree-lined streets, maybe a general store where folks gather to gossip.
Exactly. And in this town, there's this grand old house called, quite simply, the Big House.
The Big House, sounds imposing. I bet it holds a certain mystique, especially for the kids in town.
You got it. It's that house everyone's a little curious about, a little intimidated by. It represents a certain social standing, a world that's a little out of reach for most of the townsfolk.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. And is this where our protagonist, Peggy, comes in?
Yes, Peggy, whose real name we later find out is Alene, is living in this big house with her uncle.
So is she like a little princess ruling over her domain?
Not exactly. Here's the interesting part. Peggy herself comes from a wealthy background. You see it in her clothes, her manners, little details like that. But now she's in this simpler, more rural environment, and it's a bit of a fish-out-of-water situation.
Ah, I see. So she's got this refined upbringing, but now she's navigating a world that's much more down to earth. That definitely creates some interesting tension.
Right. And at the beginning of the story, Peggy's quite lonely. She's longing for connection, for friends.
Ah, that makes my heart ache for her a little. So how does she go about finding those connections?
Well, she hears about this local children's club called the Happy-Go-Luckies, and she desperately wants to be a part of it.
The Happy-Go-Luckies. I love that name. It sounds so whimsical and carefree.
It is, and what's great about them is they're not overly structured. No strict rules or schedules. They just get together and do things as they please, which adds this really charming, almost nostalgic feel to the story.
Oh, I can imagine. Kids just being kids, using their imaginations, running around having adventures. Sign me up.
Right. And it's through this club that Peggy starts to form some real, lasting friendships. Two in particular are central to the story. Her bonds with Laura and Ivy.
Oh, so we've got a little trio forming. What are Laura and Ivy like?
Laura is the kind, welcoming one, always ready with a smile and a helping hand. But she sometimes clashes with Ivy.
Oh, some little personality clashes. Sounds relatable. What about Ivy?
Ivy's a bit more complex. She uses crutches because of a physical disability, and that experience has shaped her personality. She's got this sharp wit, she's incredibly artistic, but she also has moments of envy and insecurity.
So even in this charming setting, with these seemingly lighthearted friendships, there's some real depth and complexity.
Exactly. And it's through these relationships that Peggy starts to learn about herself and the world around her. There's one scene, for instance, where they're talking about this garden of good intentions, and it really highlights how differently they all view things like kindness and selflessness.
The garden of good intentions. That sounds metaphorical, like it represents something bigger than just an actual garden.
It could be. It definitely makes you think about the different ways people approach doing good in the world, and whether it's always as simple as it seems.
It sounds like Peggy's in for quite a journey of discovery. So, to recap, we have a lonely girl in a new town. She joins this fun-loving club, makes friends with these two complex and interesting girls. What happens next?
Well, that's where things start to get really interesting. One of the overarching themes of Peggy-Alone is kindness and generosity, and we see this play out in various ways. There's this elderly woman, Mrs. Kump, who lives alone and doesn't have much, and Peggy decides to put together a gift basket for her.
Ah, that's sweet of her.
It is, but it's not just any ordinary gift basket. Amidst all the practical things like food and necessities, Peggy adds this beautiful blue candy box.
Oh, I like that detail. It's like she's trying to bring a little beauty and joy into Mrs. Kump's life and not just meet her basic needs.
Exactly. It shows real thoughtfulness and sensitivity on Peggy's part. Then there's this other heartwarming, almost comical scene where Peggy tries to give money to a street musician, but she uses this really fancy crimson bag she carries around.
Oh, I can only imagine how that encounter unfolds. A little bit awkward, perhaps.
Oh, it is, but in a sweet, endearing way. She clearly wants to help, but is so out of her element. And Ivy, ever the witty one, ends up nicknaming the musician Sir Mark because of his dignified demeanor, which just adds to the humor of the situation.
Sir Mark, I love it. Okay, so we're seeing Peggy grapple with these different ways of expressing kindness, how to actually help people in a way that feels genuine and meaningful. It's like she's learning that good intentions aren't always enough.
Precisely. And this ties into another major element of the story, social class. This small town, despite its charming exterior, has very distinct social divisions.
Ah, so that idyllic small-town vibe might be a bit deceptive then.
In a way, yes. And Peggy's interactions with a group of boys from the Stony Road really highlight this tension.
The Stony Road boys. Okay, tell me more about them.
They're often seen as rough or troublesome by the other townsfolk, sort of the bad boys of the town. But Peggy, maybe because she's an outsider herself, doesn't immediately buy into those labels. She forms a friendship with one of them, Jack Lever, and it really challenges those preconceived notions.
So Peggy's not just learning about kindness, she's also starting to see how social divisions can cloud people's judgments and create unfair biases.
Exactly. What's interesting is that her uncle, Mr. Dawson, actually encourages these friendships. He even hosts a garden party later on as a way to try and bridge those social gaps.
It sounds like Mr. Dawson is a pretty forward-thinking character, and I'm guessing this garden party is going to be a pretty important event in the story.
Oh, you bet. But before we get to that, there's this other intriguing element we need to talk about. The torchlights.
Ooh, the torchlights. Now that sounds mysterious. What are they all about?
Well, at first, they're presented as this secretive, almost enviable group. We hear about a boy named Leif, Ivy's brother, who's upset because he can't attend one of their shows. But as the story unfolds, we learn that the torchlights are actually a force for good in the town. And they're connected to both the Stony Road boys and, surprisingly, Peggy's uncle.
Wait, what? So these boys who are seen as troublemakers are part of this seemingly upstanding group? That definitely seems like a deliberate way to challenge assumptions.
It is. And the reveal of their purpose is pretty powerful. The torchlights are all about doing good deeds for others, and their membership crosses social lines. It's this beautiful blend of mystery and heartwarming community spirit.
Wow, okay. So we've got themes of kindness, complex friendships, social divisions, and this mysterious do-gooder club. It's amazing how much is packed into this seemingly simple story.
Right, and there's still so much more to unpack. For example, the story also offers this fascinating glimpse into life in a bygone era. The children's games, the community events, the slower pace of life, it all feels very nostalgic.
So on the one hand, we have these timeless themes about human connection and kindness, but on the other, we have this very specific window into a particular time and place.
That's a cool contrast. I'm starting to see why you said this book was more complex than it might seem at first. And we're just getting started. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're diving back into Peggy-Alone and all its charming yet complex layers. Last time we were talking about how those social divisions in the town are highlighted through Peggy's interactions with the Stony Road boys.
Yes, exactly. Those encounters really bring those themes to the forefront.
They do. So what are some of the key moments that illustrate this tension?
Well, there's that picnic scene. It starts all idyllic with the happy-go-luckies out enjoying a beautiful day. But then the Stony Road boys show up and kind of crash the party. Demanding food, actually, rather forcefully.
Oh, wow. I bet that created some awkwardness.
Definitely. And you see how ingrained those social divisions are through the reactions of the happy-go-luckies, most of them anyway. They're afraid, unsure of how to handle this disruption of their peaceful gathering.
But Peggy's different, right?
Right. Peggy doesn't react with fear or judgment. Maybe it's because she's an outsider herself, but she doesn't seem to buy into those preconceived notions about the Stony Road boys. In fact, she's kind of amused by the whole thing.
So she sees them as just kids being kids.
Exactly. Hungry and looking for a good time. And this scene also gives us a glimpse into the complexities of Laura.
Oh, how so?
Well, she's torn, you know. On the one hand, she wants to maintain that sense of order and propriety, but on the other, she recognizes the social inequalities at play.
So she knows it's not fair that these boys are labeled as trouble just because of their background.
Exactly. But she's still trying to figure out how to reconcile those feelings. It's that tension between societal expectations and personal conscience, which comes up a lot in the story.
Now, you mentioned that Peggy doesn't react to the Stony Road boys with fear or judgment. But I imagine there are moments where those social divisions cause friction even in their interactions.
Oh, for sure. Like that scene where Peggy accidentally steps on a caterpillar.
Oh, yeah.
One of the Stony Road boys, Matt, teases her about it. And while it seems playful on the surface, there's this subtle assertion of power dynamics going on there.
So even though Peggy is trying to befriend them, they're still putting her in her place, in a way.
Right. They're reminding her of that social gap between them. And even though Peggy tries to brush it off, you see later that it affects her more than she lets on. There's a moment where she's trying to hide her tears.
It's a reminder that those small acts of exclusion or teasing, they can have a real impact, especially for kids.
Absolutely. And then there's that scene where she's sent to buy fish from the market. She's all prepared to go, but then she sees some of those boys, including the one who tried to hit her, and she completely freezes up.
Because now those negative stereotypes have taken root.
Exactly, showing how quickly fear and prejudice can overshadow kindness and reason. But what's interesting is Jack Lever, he sees her fear and immediately reassures her. He even jokes about not robbing her.
It's like he senses that prejudice and wants to prove her wrong.
Right. And to top it all off, she accidentally gives him the fish.
That's great. It's funny, but also highlights that unexpected kindness that the novel emphasizes.
Exactly. It's those unplanned moments of genuine connection that really stand out.
So Peggy's learning to look beyond those social labels.
Yes, to see the humanity in each individual. And this idea is further emphasized through her interactions with Sir Mark, the street musician.
Oh, yes. That scene where she tries to give him money using that fancy crimson bag.
Exactly. So awkward, yet endearing. And that contrast, between her fumbling attempts and his quiet dignity, it really speaks volumes. It's as if the novel is suggesting that true generosity isn't about grand gestures or showing off your wealth. It's about seeing the other person and offering what you can, even if it's just a small gesture of kindness.
It really brings home that point about empathy and understanding.
And speaking of understanding, Peggy actually decides to try an interesting experiment. She wants to understand what it's like to be poor, so she tries living on a very limited budget for a week.
Oh, wow. So she's trying to step outside of her privilege and experience life from a different perspective.
Exactly. Of course, it's still a game for her, since she can always go back to her comfortable life. But it does lead to some thought-provoking moments, like when she has to shop at this unique floating marketplace, carefully considering every purchase.
I love that detail. Using these everyday situations to explore those deeper themes of social class.
And in this setting, she meets a boy who is also struggling with a limited budget. He's trying to choose a picture for his mother.
Oh, that sounds sweet.
It is. And Peggy, even though she's pretending to be poor herself, uses her knowledge and resources to help him make the best choice.
It's a reminder that poverty isn't just about a lack of money, but also a lack of access and opportunity.
Exactly. Now, amidst all this exploration of social class, we also have this recurring motif of theatricality in the story.
Oh, right. Like with the Happy-Go-Lucky's production of The Pilgrim's Progress.
Yes. And then later, they attend a live performance of the same play. But because of Hermione and Vera's giant hats, the younger kids can't see anything.
It's almost comical, but it also points to something deeper.
Right. These theatrical elements highlight how appearances and social status can actually obstruct our view of the world. And of course, it's Peggy who steps in to help the younger kids see.
Always looking out for those who are overlooked. So we see Peggy growing and changing through these experiences.
Absolutely. And those themes of social division and kindness all come together through the torchlights. Remember how we started out wondering about this secretive club?
Yes. Now we know they're all about doing good deeds.
Right. And that reveal that Jack Lever and Mark Griffin, another one of the Stony Road boys, are members, is so powerful.
It really challenges those assumptions about who gets to be a do-gooder.
Exactly. And this idea is beautifully illustrated in that scene where the torchlights gather in the big house after the garden party.
It's like their own little celebration of kindness and community.
Yes. And Jack Lever explains how the club came to be. He compares the torchlights to those annoying burrs that stick to your clothes.
It's such a clever analogy.
It really highlights how those acts of kindness, even small ones, can spread and have a lasting impact, connecting people in ways we might not expect.
And the fact that Philip, Mark Griffin's younger brother, is now a member, shows how kindness can be passed down, how it can become a family tradition.
Peggy-Alone offers a really profound and heartwarming message about the transformative power of kindness.
It does. So we've covered a lot of ground, from Peggy's initial loneliness to her experiences with the Stony Road Boys and the Torchlights. And now I'm really curious about that garden party and how it all comes together.
Yes, the garden party. That's where we'll see all these themes and Peggy's journey culminate.
All right, so we're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into Peggy-Alone. We've talked about Peggy's journey, her friendships, the Stony Road Boys, that mysterious Torchlights Club. And now I'm really curious to hear how it all culminates with that big garden party at the big house.
The garden party, it's more than just a social gathering. It's really the culmination of everything Peggy's learned throughout the story.
Oh, I like that. So she's taking those lessons about kindness, about empathy, about seeing beyond social labels, and she's putting them into action.
Exactly. And she does it in such a natural, unforced way. She simply creates this welcoming space where people from all walks of life can come together and connect.
So who all makes the guest list for this grand event?
Everyone. She invites the happy-go-luckies, the Stony Road Boys, even some of those more well-to-do families. It's a real mix of the town's social circles.
Wow, that's ambitious. But does it actually work? Do people actually put aside those differences and connect? Or does it end up being more of a symbolic gesture?
It's a resounding success. The novel really paints this heartwarming picture of people from all backgrounds mingling, enjoying each other's company, and genuinely connecting.
So that vision of unity and harmony, it actually comes to life.
It does. And Peggy's uncle, Mr. Dawson, he plays a really key role in facilitating this sense of community.
He does. How so?
Well, he encourages Peggy to invite everyone. He makes sure there's plenty of food, entertainment. He really embodies that spirit of warmth and inclusivity.
It sounds like he's not just supporting Peggy's efforts, but actively participating in creating this more equitable environment.
Exactly. And that really speaks to one of the core messages of the novel. Positive change starts with individuals taking action.
It's those ripples of kindness that can spread outward.
Exactly. And what about Peggy? She started out as this lonely girl yearning for connection. How does she feel amidst all of this?
Yeah, how does she experience this garden party that she orchestrated?
It's really a beautiful transformation. She's gone from feeling lost and isolated to being this bridge between different groups, someone who actively fosters a sense of belonging.
So that initial yearning for connection, it's actually leading her to create that connection for others.
Right. And remember how we talked about that recurring motif of theatricality? Well, this garden party, it's almost like a performance itself.
In what way?
It's as if Peggy and her uncle are staging a play, about unity and harmony, and everyone's invited to participate. It's about creating this shared experience, this vision of a world where those social divisions fade away.
And as a reader, you get drawn into that performance, right?
Yeah.
You start to imagine how these different characters might interact in a more equitable world.
Exactly. It sparks this sense of hope, this possibility that we can actually create a world that reflects those values of Peggy-Alone, the inclusivity, the kindness.
So what is it about Peggy-Alone that makes it so enduring, so relevant, even though it was written in a different time?
Well, it might offer a glimpse into a bygone era, but those themes of kindness, empathy, social justice, they're as timely as ever.
Right. The world might change, but that basic human need for connection, it remains constant.
And so we leave you with this. What small acts of kindness can you bring into your own life? How can you be a bridge between different groups? We encourage you to seek out Peggy-Alone and discover its timeless wisdom.
Who knows? You might just be inspired to create your own little garden party of unity and harmony. That's all for today's Deep Dive. Until next time, keep seeking those connections, keep choosing kindness. We'll see you soon.